Web shooters, or web slingers if you like, are hands down the most iconic gadget in the entire superhero arsenal. Two little boxes on the wrists, and suddenly a high schooler is zipping over Manhattan, snatching trains out of the air with his bare hands and wrapping muggers into neat little packages like an Amazon courier dropping off an order. Cool? Insanely cool. But would this one-of-a-kind gizmo from a made-up world be just as deadly in ours? A quick note on the nature of the webbing first. Different adaptations handled web shooters completely differently. In Sam Raimi's Tobey Maguire trilogy, the webbing shot straight out of organic glands that grew on Peter's wrists. Pure mutation. But what we care about is the mechanical version, the one that's truer to the comics and the one we see on Andrew Garfield in The Amazing Spider-Man. That's the one we're putting on the table. Welcome, you're on MiliTime Fiction. In today's episode, we'll break down how Peter Parker's mechanical web shooters actually work, whether you could build one for real, and, most importantly, whether an ordinary person could swing across a city the way our friendly neighborhood spider does. Spoiler, the hardware isn't the problem, the human is. Alright, let's break it down. So how does a web shooter actually work? The designers themselves give us a hand here. The concept artists put out breakdowns with the parts labeled. Honestly, half the info on those is secondary. You only really get the mechanics in motion. But the overall idea comes through fine. The pellet chamber. The heart of the device is a reservoir of web fluid, the pellet. It's a capsule of compound that becomes webbing on the way out. Per the film, a single pellet holds up to a few hundred meters, over 1,000 feet, of cable. The pellets ring the wrist and swap out as they run dry, with a semi-automatic reload for changing them. In the comics, Peter even carried spare capsules on his belt, so he's got an ammo loadout like any proper shooter. The trigger. It's a copper ribbon with a button on one end. It all runs on electronics. The art shows a transistor and a lithium battery. What the battery has to do with the wearer's pulse is a separate question. Apparently, the thing reads its owner's biometrics, so not just anyone can fire it. Makes sense? Yeah, it makes sense. It's a personal weapon, and a lockout so it won't work in the wrong hands is never a bad idea. The anticoagulant module. Now this is a fun one. Anticoagulants are substances that suppress clotting. Inside a web shooter, a module like that most likely keeps the webbing from setting too early, right there in the tubing. And there's probably a solvent in there too, something that cuts a strand loose when our spider hops from web to web. The logic is airtight. The material is so strong you basically can't snap the thread with a blade or by hand, so you'd have to dissolve it chemically. But that one's just my guess. And what's actually firing it? There are no compressors or pneumatics anywhere in the device. Only one conclusion: the shot is driven by the pressure inside the pellet itself. And I found a hard number for it. The fluid sits at 300 pounds per square inch. And here's where I have to correct a myth people love to repeat. 300 pounds per square inch is not some dinky little pressure. That's about 2 megapascals, roughly 20 atmospheres. For scale, a car tire runs around 30 pounds per square inch, about 2 bars, so a web shooter is roughly 10 times that. Sounds intense, but next to a paintball tank around 800 pounds per square inch or a scuba tank around 3,000, it's actually modest. So with a properly sealed capsule, holding one in your hand really is relatively safe. So can we actually build this thing? Short answer, yes, and it's already been done. And not by nobodies. Remember the folks at Hacksmith Industries? Back in 2017, they built electromagnetic claws to climb walls like Spidey. And in 2020, a grappling hook web-slinging rig you can genuinely swing between anchor points with. But the best example is an engineer from South Africa, a former Hacksmith intern who goes by Built IRL. For his university thesis, he spent 2 years grinding on a working web shooter and ended up with a compact little rig that holds a full-grown adult's weight and lets you actually swing on a line. Sure, it's no sleek Oscorp gadget, more like a bundle of metal cylinders with gym straps, but it works. And you know the first thing the write-ups flagged about it? That the thing threatens some serious joint pain. Hold that thought. We're coming back to it. More than once. So the spraying mechanism itself is by and large a solved engineering problem. Trouble is, more than half of a web shooter's magic isn't in the hardware at all. It's in the webbing. And that's where the real mess begins. Enter the real star, the webbing. The film's web fluid is based on Oscorp's biocable, a material derived from genetically modified spiders. And that, believe it or not, isn't even that far-fetched. In real life, scientists have been fighting for years to produce spider silk at scale. For the exact same reason as in the movie, the stuff is a ridiculously good material. You've probably heard the line, "Spider silk is stronger than steel." And here's where I've got to switch on the insufferable know-it-all you actually subscribed for. Head-to-head on raw tensile strength, silk does not beat steel. Dragline silk, the load-bearing strand, comes in around 1 to 1.6 gigapascals, averaging about 1.3. Decent steel comfortably hits 1.5 to 2 gigapascals and up, so on pure strength, good steel is at least its equal. The twice as strong myth comes from a mix-up. People love comparing silk to mild steel, which is actually pretty weak. So where's its superpower then? 3 places. 1. Weight. Silk is about 6 times lighter than steel. Density approximately 1.3 versus approximately 7.8 grams per cubic centimeter. So gram for gram, spider silk is roughly 5 times stronger. Strength to weight? Top tier. 2. Stretch. Dragline silk can stretch 27 to 40% of its length before it snaps. Steel can't do that at all. 3, and the big one, toughness. That's how much energy a material eats before breaking. And here, silk absolutely wrecks the field, around 130 to 180 megajoules per cubic meter. Steel? A measly 6. Kevlar, the stuff in bulletproof vests, about 50. Silk is flat out 3 times tougher than Kevlar at soaking up a hit. And now, pay attention, this is the key bit. When you see the spider stop a subway car or catch a car dangling over a drop, it's not strength doing the work, it's stretch plus toughness. The thread doesn't hold the train dead solid like a steel cable. It stretches and smears the jolt out over time, bleeding off that monstrous energy. A steel cable of the same thickness would just snap on a jerk like that, or rip its anchors clean out. So physically, silk of that cross-section really could take those loads. Hats off to nature's engineering. With properties like that, spider silk is begging to be used everywhere. The obvious one, an ultralight bulletproof vest that weighs about as much as a heavy winter coat but stops a hit better than Kevlar. So why aren't we all wrapped in silk head to toe? Because it's a nightmare to produce. You can't just milk a swarm of spiders, they're expensive to keep, they don't spin much, and, the killer, arachnids can't stand living in colonies and eat each other the second they get a chance. A spider farm turns into a battle royale with one survivor. But progress is happening. Scientists at Kyoto University made a fluid from an artificial protein called spidroin, the very stuff spider silk is made of, and by playing with the pH, got it to set into a material close to real webbing. The process, by the way, sounds eerily like the artificial web fluid from The Amazing Spider-Man. And companies like Japan's Spiber and Germany's AM Silk are already turning out synthetic spider silk in industrial batches, mostly for textiles and cosmetics for now, but hey, it's a start. There's even an almost literal web shooter prototype. Scientists dissolved silkworm silk in acetone, added sticky dopamine and chitosan from crab shells, and got a fluid that fires out as a thread, hardens, and lifts objects 80 times its own weight. Mind you, the current record is reeling in something the weight of a coin from a whopping 12 centimeters, about 5 inches, away. We're a ways off from hello there, criminal. But the principle? Already here. So all told, a full-on web shooter in our world is a question of when, not if. The only thing left is, could you actually use the thing the way they do in the movies? And that's where it gets really interesting. Why a regular person could never swing like that. Blunt version, a regular person cannot go swinging across a city like a spider. And it's not even about not sticking to walls. It's that an ordinary human's musculoskeletal system and ligaments simply can't take the load. Let's break it down, bone by bone, literally. The shoulder is the most treacherous joint in your body. It's the most mobile joint you've got, and at the same time, the least stable. It's held together not by bone, but by the muscles of the rotator cuff, and it's built for manipulation, throwing, swinging, reaching. It is fundamentally not designed to hang your whole body off of, let alone catch sudden jerks, and it's exactly those jerks that kill it. When the web catches and your body suddenly snaps forward, your arm acts like a rigid lever and dumps the shock straight into the shoulder. Even at the bottom of a pendulum swing, the tension is already several times your body weight. At a good speed, that's a solid 2 to 3 G, easily more. Add a sharp launch jerk on top and you get a dislocated shoulder, a torn rotator cuff, and a brachial plexus injury in one flashy leap. Remember that South African engineer whose rig got praised for its joint pain? That's this, and that's on gentle, slow swings, not flying between skyscrapers. Now look at who can actually do this. Gibbons and orangutans are brachiators, masters of moving hand over hand. But their whole bodies are rebuilt for it. Elongated arms, hook-shaped hands, a reduced thumb so it doesn't get in the way of the grip, a mobile shoulder blade, and an absolute monster of a rotator cuff. Some chimp swings branch to branch like it's nothing, because its muscles are so savage it could rip a grown man's arm clean out of the socket without breaking a sweat. We humans have none of that. Even the most jacked pull-up champion on Earth is no Gibbon. And then there's the anatomy of your center of gravity. A human's center of mass sits roughly around the pelvis, about level with the sacrum, so arms raised overhead make a handy lever above that center, to swing the body like on a rope swing. The idea is actually sound, putting the shooters on the wrists is reasonable. The problem isn't the geometry, it's that our anchor points, shoulders, ligaments, spines, can't survive the loads that geometry creates. And notice, Peter himself can take it because he's a mutant who throws tens of tons around. For him, it all checks out. In fact, the writers are honest about it here and there. The plot holes that personally drive me up the wall. Why doesn't the spider stick to his own webbing? He's literally holding onto it with his hands. Fine, say his skin has some special molecular makeup. Okay, but the spandex of his suit is bog standard. And yet, by some miracle, only the parts of the thread farthest from his palm turn out sticky. In reality, that trick doesn't fly. The fluid is extruded from a single nozzle, so the thread is either sticky all over, as in our hero glues himself to it, or not sticky at all. Funny thing, by the way, on a real spider, the load-bearing dragline isn't sticky at all. Only the capture spiral is, and even then, it's thanks to separate little droplets of glue. Nature solves this with different glands and different threads, not one magic strand that's sticky on one end. So on this one, the movie got out-engineered by a random spider in your backyard. Where's the web fluid gauge? There's no dial, no counter on the shooter. How does the spider know he's got enough fluid to reach the next skyscraper? Or whether he's about to elegantly faceplant onto the asphalt? Spider sense? Yeah, sure. And even with a gauge, free-flying still wouldn't work. You'd have to constantly run the numbers on how much you've got left and how far it'll reach. Swinging over the city turns into a timed mental math physics exam. Sounds like a pain in the ass if you ask me. And the mundane but brutal one, anchor points. Web slinging only works where there's something overhead to grab. In dense Manhattan, paradise. But head out to the suburbs with two-story houses or into an open field, and that's it. Our little spider is walking, just like the rest of us mortals. You'd think that settles it, but nope. Even in the perfect city, half your routes get planned not by where's convenient, but by where's a tall anchor. As a device, the web shooter is a genuinely realistic thing in the near future. Hobbyists are building the spraying mechanism in their garages, and real companies are already producing synthetic spider silk. Give it a year or two of scaling up production and the full-blown equivalent becomes reality. But using it the way they do in the movies, an ordinary person can't. It's a wildly injury-prone toy. It'll pop your shoulders, tear your ligaments and muscles, and give your spine a solid beating on the very first flashy leap. Let's keep the two questions honest. Building it? Doable, flying like Garfield? Nope. As for combat use, the future of webbing is in defense, not offense. Ultra-light bulletproof armor that weighs like a winter coat and stops a hit better than Kevlar, that's where this tech actually goes. Cocooning criminals looks great, but passive protection is far more practical. On our scale, the web shooter earns a solid 7 out of 10 pellets. Engineering-wise almost real, materials-wise nearly there, but the ergonomics for a squishy meat sack without spider genes really dropped the ball. And that's the deal. Drop your thoughts on today's topic and pitch ideas for future episodes down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the ride. This has been MiliTime Fiction. Good luck out there, and see you around.